voters have not yet been exposed, principally via the media, to what Kamala Harris's past positions actually are. I don't blame the voters. They've been served up a new version of Kamala Harris where she is running to the center on economic and social policies. But the reality is, if we're able to use Kamala Harris's own words against her, as I believe we should, she ran for president favoring an tax on unrealized capital gains, favoring an abolition, her words, to abolish private health insurance, a ban on fracking, bans on offshore drilling. These are the kinds of policies that absolutely are not mainstream for most Americans. And this is where I do think the debate will be useful. I do think that greater media scrutiny of Kamala Harris, hopefully with more sit-down interviews than we've had so far, will be helpful. Say what you will, you may or may not agree with Donald Trump. He and J.D. Vance have sat for tens of interviews, as have other members of the campaign and surrogate team. The reality is we haven't seen the same from Kamala Harris. I do expect that's going to change in the next couple of months, and I believe voters are going to be very well informed heading into November. So look, the reality is Donald Trump's been clear about his policy positions. With Kamala Harris, she said she didn't favor a ban on fracking now. The reality is she was one of the strongest proponents of that ban, so much so that when she was in California, she sued the Obama administration over granting fracking permits. She didn't just favor the abolition of private health insurance. She was a co-sponsor of the bill with Bernie Sanders as a U.S. Senator for Medicare for All for Americans. The reality is, when you think about the Green New Deal, she was the chief proponent, not just as a co-sponsor of the legislation, but going further and saying she would end the filibuster in the Senate to ram that through. So the reality is she can say what she wants to say now. Those are actions she has taken. Is someone allowed to evolve? Of course they are, but she deserves to explain exactly why she's changed those positions, exactly what her position is. If it's not a ban on fracking, what exactly is it? What exactly is her healthcare plan if she no longer favors abolishing private health insurance, which just 4 short years ago when she ran for president, she did? And that's the kind of scrutiny that's been missing. I think Donald Trump has received plenty of scrutiny, and I give credit to him for sitting for hostile interviews that Kamala Harris has not. But the American people and the American electorate deserve a rich policy debate that they have not had with Kamala. I think it's perfectly acceptable. I think most people need to rethink their positions over time as facts change. But they deserve to explain to the people clearly what she has failed to do. And it's not just a change in position. These are hard positions on which she has actually taken policy action, both as a vice president, an attorney general, and a U.S. senator. And simply saying she doesn't believe that anymore is not a sufficient explanation on core issues that affect costs for Americans, healthcare for Americans, taxation for Americans, including taxes on unrealized gains, on which she has not yet changed her position. That, I think, is a devastating economic policy that's among those she needs to explain, and she hasn't done it. The truth of the matter is Donald Trump has been crystal clear that, first of all, this is an issue for the states. Will the U.S. president ban abortion? And, well, first of all, in his capacity for running for U.S. president, what he's running for Kamala Harris against, he has been clear that he is against a federal ban on abortion. Now, on the Florida bill, which I want to address as well, there is a difference between being opposed to a 6-week ban, which he's been consistent on, both during the campaign when I ran against him, as well as throughout, that he's against a 6-week ban. That is different than what this ballot measure accomplishes. This ballot measure, through its vague crafting, would allow abortions far after 6 weeks, arguably under the interpretation of some legal scholars, all the way up to the point of birth. He's against that, and that's been a consistent position as well. So I do think this attempt by Democrats, and its politics, so you'd expect it, to conflate an opposition to a 6-week ban with somehow being in favor of a ballot measure that actually would allow for far more than that is, I think, sophistry. And the job of voters, I hope they do it, is to see through that, even if it's served up to the media. You can't conflate those two things, and I don't think that's an inconsistency, with all due respect. That is and should be illegal, except for when you look at the vaguely drafted statutes that are now expanding in these ballot measures. And I think that's the debate we ought to be having in this country, is an honest debate at the state level. And where I give Donald Trump a lot of credit, and this was my position during the presidential campaign as well, is that this is an issue for the states in a post-Dobbs world. I think Roe was correctly overturned. I think most Republicans agree on that. This is now an issue for the states. And I know that Democrats want to make this a core issue, but the reality is it's not a presidential issue anymore. It belongs to the states. Kamala Harris has wrongly characterized and wrongfully stated, I think in this case I'd call it an outright lie, saying Donald Trump would sign a federal abortion ban when he's been clear that he's against a federal position on this issue. And I think voters deserve that kind of clarity.